welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Turn the Page. I'm your host today, Jen, and I am joined by the author of a horror novel that scared the pants off me in a very efficient amount of time. Like, it's really packed of horrible, horrible things. Really great. So I am so excited to talk about this and to welcome our guests. So hello, welcome to the show. Could I ask you to introduce yourself and your book?
Absolutely. My name is Evie Knight. I am the author of the upcoming book, The House on the Cover of a Horror Novel, and the author of several other books as well. But this one is my newest, and it's coming out September 12th, and I'm super excited to talk about it today.
Yeah, I am so excited to talk about it and for folks to read this. It truly is like I could not put this down. I read it in such a short amount of time, despite being like really, really scared. And like I love when a book is so scary that I like am afraid to read it before bed, you know? Like, and this was one of those for me. So to get into it, can we talk a little bit about your journey to the book? You said you've written some other things.
Mhm.
Curious about what the inception point for this novel is. Yeah.
Yes, I've written some other things. I won the Bram Stoker Award for my very first debut novel, The Fourth Whore, which is a very sort of angry feminist novel that was basically of its time. There's a lot of political stuff going on when I wrote that. It is usually when I get inspired to write something, it's usually based on whatever's happening in my life as well. And 3 years ago, I moved from Michigan to Savannah, Georgia, and just fell in love with the past of it, the haunting. Like everywhere you go feels ancient and like there just, I don't know, there's just something about the town that I fell in love with. And I've always loved the gothic feel of Poe and things like that. So I wanted to write like a Southern Gothic. I wanted to write an homage to Savannah and how it made me feel. And I I've been like really thinking a lot about how we have all this energy as humans and how we leave it behind in things we loved and made and created, and can we bring those things to life as well? So can those inanimate things become almost animate as well? And so I really wanted to approach it as, could a house be haunted with its own sort of consciousness almost? And in my day job, I'm an OBGYN, and so I always like to explore the mother aspect of things and motherhood, and because it's scary to be a mom. It's so yeah, so that's kind of where I was when I started, and actually was just driving around downtown Savannah one day and I saw this house and I was like, that's the house I need to write about, and that's how it went.
That's so cool. Yeah, because my very next question was almost immediately going to be super meta and be like, was it inspired by a real house? So that's great.
It really was. Yes, it really was inspired by a real house.
Nice. So was it like a house that you got to experience in any way? Like, did you get to explore it, or was it just really just like the external structure that
It
like
was, that one was really just the external structure. I did not get to explore it. It was up for sale, and I looking back, why didn't I? But I just did the Zillow thing and looked through it. And I think sometimes it's better to just kind of imagine what you want. At the same time, I had a friend who had gifted me some haunted objects, and it was like a doll and the little push toy thing that I actually have, and I have a whole collection of all kinds of gothic stuff. So yes, so this supposedly haunted things, and then those kind of came together, and I was like, yes, I'm putting these in the story, and it all just kind of came together from there.
nice. Yeah, I am so into just the initiating premise of this book. Like when I read the description in the Raw Dog Screaming Press newsletter, I
Mhm.
was like, yeah, yes, 100% I'm in. And so I emailed them and set this up.
Yay.
But I would love for you to talk a little bit about our protagonist, M, and where she finds herself at the beginning of this novel, because it's the situation she finds herself in at the very beginning is
Yes.
like a dream come true for an artist. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So, you know, she's an artist, kind of the small time, you know, taking commissions from different people, doing some book covers for indie and small press. And, you know, I think everyone, writers and book cover artists, always are waiting for that big, you know, big name to come along and help us out and give us that little bump. And yeah, and so here's this amazing horror novelist, Stephen King-esque sort of presence, who falls in love with her art and like just calls her out of the blue and invites her to do a cover that will inspire him to write a Southern Gothic. So I kind of imbued that, like, hey, help me write this Southern Gothic, Emily. And yeah, so he wants to write a Southern Gothic. He's from the New England area, of course, and so, you know, he's never lived there. He needs inspiration, so inspire me with something. And so that's kind of, she's got this big break. And of course that's when the block comes, right? So then she's dealing with this block of, oh my gosh, what can I use? And then just one day, sort of the same story as me, she's driving around, and this house that she didn't even know existed on this road, she sees it, and boom, that's it. It just draws her in. And she's so excited. She's like immediately sketching. She's so, you know, she calls the agent, and he comes over to show her the house, and then things immediately start rolling from there.
Mhm. Yeah, it is so interesting. And I really love like this is going to be my segue into like the initiating event and some of what ensues. I think the book does a really good job at exploring like the pressure that can be put on women to be like either a muse or a mother, and how
Right.
both cases like there's an incredible amount of responsibility about like ushering something into the world,
Right.
and like what that
Yes.
does to you. It's super fascinating.
Exactly. And I think because we're constantly as women trying to juggle these things, right? It's so easy to call us crazy when we've become overwhelmed. It's just like, this is a lot on my plate and I need a little help. And instead we're whining, we're bitching, we're nagging, we're complaining, you know? And yeah, I mean, motherhood and a career is, you know, those constant stressors and juggling acts that women go through. um so yeah, I really wanted that whole, oh, you're crazy, you know, oh, it's just your postpartum, it's your hormones, it's, you know, all those things that everything gets blown off. Like, we don't believe women because we're hormonal. I mean, this has been from the beginning of time, that it's always been the excuse. Everything ends in the womb, right? Everything begins and ends in our womb. That's our whole existence. We're just a vessel for this thing. And history was written by men, right? So yeah, I mean, we've been gaslighting ourselves for centuries.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes me think about like how women throughout history have so often been praised, especially mothers, for being selfless or for,
Right.
so giving endlessly, and how, that compliment given over time can like actually be a social directive, like, and
Yep.
be like conditioning to not ask for anything, to not ask for support.
Exactly. Exactly. Because anytime we raise our voice or speak up or raise our hand, it's, you know, we're the problem. We're becoming a problem, you know. So yeah, that whole thing of believe women, and I wanted, you know, always love to throw a little bit of that into my novels as well. So you'll see that, like, that's a common theme in a lot of my novels, is that whole, we have to believe women, we have to give them more of a platform to speak up and tell their truth.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was super curious to hear that your background is in OBGYN, as the pregnancy aspects that we can talk about. There's a lot
Hmm.
of body horror there and a lot of
Hmm.
psychological horror, like you brought up the postpartum depression and how that can,
Hmm.
be a real experience, but can also be used to gaslight you and to like invalidate
Yes.
your experiences. So
Mhm.
can you talk about how your background shaped your depiction of that in the
Mhm.
book?
I think I'm lucky in that regard, because my background allows me to write pretty accurate body horror. So that moment, the birth moment itself, I have I have seen those things happen. You know, I've seen them happen. Luckily, in a hospital where we can intervene. So it was fairly easy to write it because I've been at a woman's bedside, in the midst of those things. And I'm very lucky to have that to be able to work with. And regarding the psychological stuff, I think that just goes with the territory too. I mean, I see women, we talk postpartum. There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of what ifs. There's a lot of that fear that you're going to lose your baby. You wake up in the morning and it's just missing or gone. Or so there is a lot of anxiety associated in the postpartum, and it's easy to even as another woman to brush them off and just be like, it's okay, this is normal, and so yeah, I just really wanted to kind of highlight that whole thing of brushing things off until we're like, oh shoot, maybe we should have listened to you.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. And Emily's husband is a large factor in that. Like, and I would love to
yes.
talk about him and,
Mhm.
and the dual perspective chapters, because
Yes.
I really love it. It's a really smart choice because, like, obviously, like, our sympathy for Miles is limited, but I think the insight into his head keeps him from being like an over the top 100% villain.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
you talk about crafting him.
Yes. So he was really fun because I really wanted to make him sort of this lovable, flawed character. Like I really did believe, like you said, if we had just stayed with Emily the whole time, we would hate Miles, and we wouldn't struggle with him even, in the end when he's really struggling. I wanted him to be struggling with his own ideals. He's a born and raised Southern boy. His masculinity, his opinions are a little archaic, but he's aware of it. And so he's trying very hard to remind himself constantly that I got to be a better person. I got to be a better guy. I got to listen, but it's so hard for him because of this just who he is and how he was raised. And so dealing with this a little bit of like homophobia, and yet very well aware of it. And so trying, as you see as we go on, his like over the top trying with Cam later on to be like, now remember, and it's more him. And so it's his reminder. And I think that fault of his allows the ending to happen believably, I hope.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, like he is very human in ways I think that like everybody has experienced, and I think that yeah, he is trying his hardest in a very difficult situation.
It's a good thing he's got a twin sister to like smack him upside the head a
You
couple
know.
times.
So I would love to talk a little bit too about writing the horror scenes, like the sort of
Mhm.
like set piece scenes where you get super scared. I'm really interested in like what authors choose to show and what they choose to obscure in those moments. Because some fear comes from seeing stuff and some fear comes from not seeing stuff. So
Mhm.
let's talk about that.
I'm thinking one for me is it's a recurring nightmare that I've always had. And I'm sure a lot of people, I've read that, it's that whole trying to get to something or run away from something and sort of being slowed and mired down, right? So there's a scene where she's trying to get to the baby and the house is slowing her down. And it's like the nightmare we all have of like, why am I running through molasses? Why? Oh, you know, and I think because those things are a common fear that we all, I think we've all had dreams like that where you just everything is going slow, or you're trying to dial a number and you keep, at least those are my nightmares. And so yeah, I think these are common things that we've experienced, or as women there's a lot in there that we have experienced. So it's easy to kind of just make, put some hints in and then let our own fears kind of run wild with it. So I think when you're touching on something that you feel is pretty universal, it's easy to just throw some hints in and let the reader take their own fears and personalize that moment, and then you don't have to tell as much. If it's something that perhaps no one has like the body horror scene where when she has the baby, I don't know that everybody has experienced that, so I felt that one needed a lot more time, kind of. So that's how I approach it. If I feel like it's a universal fear, I fear something that we all have experienced, then it's easier to kind of just start throwing the little crumbs out for you to pick up and do what you want with them, versus, you know, if it's something that I feel like you may not have experienced, then I spend a little more time on it. That's just my approach.
Cool. That's really interesting. Like, because that does sort of entail like an act of trust in the reader, right? It's like you
Absolutely.
can supply your half of this. Like
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And I want, yeah. And maybe it's also just because it's scary to me. And so because it's scary, it's easy to kind of back off and be like, I don't want to, I don't want to talk about this. I'm just gonna put it out there and let us all like feel it together.
Absolutely. Oh, cool. All right. Well, my last question has to
Mhm.
do with the cover. So let's get meta about the house on the cover of the house on the
Yes.
cover of a horror novel.
Yes. Yes.
Um, the art's amazing. I really love the art. And I imagine that pressure was huge, just given that like it's about a house on the cover of a horror
Right.
novel.
Right. Yeah, so Lynn Hanson, the artist, is, I don't know if you're familiar with her work, but oh my gosh, she did the cover for another book of mine, the Children of Demeter book, and she did that cover. She also put little like Easter eggs in the cover. So when you look at it, it's this psychedelic looking thing, and then there's all these tiny little things from the book that she like managed to sneak in there. So I knew I wanted her for this. So I told Raw Dog, please, I really want Lynn. And I did it with this time. Last time I sent her, you know, sort of a lot of different psychedelic posters, kind of, this is the feel I want. But this time I just said, take it, do what you want with it. And when she sent it back, it was insane how much that house that she did looked like the house that I had saw. I never sent her a picture. I never told her about it. So I was thrilled because I was like, okay, that means I did a decent job at describing it. But like, I don't know how she does it, like with the color schemes. And it's like this retro looking sort of 80s style haunted house looking cover, but it's got that, like, I don't know, like the dark, like you can see the Spanish moss hanging. You can see all those things that make it sort of creepy. And again, she's got little parts, like she's got the weather vane in there from that we talked about. Like, so I love that she does that. I love that she takes pieces from the story and actually incorporates them. You know, it's just tiny little details. And yeah, and then the color, like sort of like that sundown kind of thing that backlights this house, like it was perfect. I didn't we never changed a thing. Like she turned it in and we said, yeah, let's go with it. The font, everything. I just love the feel. It looks like a haunted house book. Like if I saw it at the bookstore, I would pick it up because it looks like a haunted house book, and I love haunted houses.
Me too. It's so good. And I do love including those elements from the book because like it's sort of like when you finish the book and then you go back to look at the cover, it means so much more.
Yes,
You know?
absolutely. Yeah, for sure, for sure. So yeah, she did a fabulous job.
Cool. So what's on your horizon? I know that authors often can't talk about like what's in process or what's in the,
Right.
but like are you writing at the moment or
Yeah, so I have another little like novelette that will hopefully will probably be the end of this year or the beginning of next. Just a little novelette, and that one sort of is exploring like a budding serial killer sort of finding her way through puberty basically and life and that sort of thing. So I'm excited about that one. And otherwise, actually, I'm working on a podcast that I want to start on the history of women's health and how we have been gaslit almost by science and like that has backed up science and medicine, you know, from the very start has backed up the society and social views as well, right? Again, because a lot of history is written by men. And so I really wanted to explore how the history of women's health has got us to where we are today, and why still today we're struggling to believe and listen to women when they say that, you know, they're in pain or they're having issues. So that's just my little side project for my day job, but I really just kind of wanted almost to take a break and start exploring those things. And I think that this book inspired me to really start looking at it, because it's a theme I'm starting to see in all my writing, that I'm constantly looking at that woman just being a woman as the unreliable narrator, right? because she's a woman. And so really inspired me to take another look and see, like, how did we get here? How did we get to a point in 2024 that these things are still believable? And so it's just a side project I want to try. And so I'm hopefully putting that all together, and hopefully sometime in October or November I'll launch that. So that's my little side project. And then I have the novelette coming out probably early next year.
Wow. Well, that all sounds fascinating, especially that podcast. I will definitely be listening to that.
Yeah. I'll email you and let you know.
Thank you so much for joining us. This
Yeah,
is
thanks for having me.
no
Yes, thank you.
All right, listeners, it's up to you now. It's your turn. Please check out The House on the Cover of a Horror Novel. It is so much fun and like horrifying fun, like,
Yeah.
like really, really troubling fun.
Yeah, horrifying.
All right, I'm going to close this chapter. Thank you so much for joining us. Bye.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.